Growing up as a kid, I had always wanted to play the piano for the longest time. I remember constantly being at my parents to get me piano lessons, but they never agreed. They said it was too expensive and they don't have the money for it. But one day they came to me and said they had managed to find me a piano teacher who gives lessons for extremely cheap prices. The moment they told me, I was ecstatic and eagerly awaited to meet my teacher. When we arrived at the address he had given us, we saw an old brick five-story apartment complex, and sitting on the front stairs was a tall man. He wore a black three-piece suit and sported a red bow tie. A small pair of spectacles rested on his eyes, and he had a thick head of silver hair that was slicked back. He introduced himself as Isaac. He said that he was a retired musician and spent his free time teaching other kids like me how to play the piano. Isaac wore a kind and patient demeanor. He invited us into his home. He lived on the first floor, and the elevator wasn't broken, so we didn't have to climb any flights of stairs, thankfully. When I entered his apartment, I immediately noticed how weird it smelled. His home had a strong chemical smell to it, like bleach or laundry detergent. My parents didn't say anything, though, so I just chose to ignore it. And after he finished explaining to my parents what my schedule would be like and how much the lessons would cost, I was set. They left and told me they'd be back to pick me up. Thus began my weekly routine every day after school. My parents would drop me off at Isaac's, and he would teach me piano, and it was amazing. I loved Isaac, and how he taught me. He was always patient with me, and if there was something I didn't understand, he always made sure he always made sure to take it one step at a time until I figured it out. And it was great until something happened. It was like any other day until Isaac told me he needed to go take care of something and left. He was gone for what seemed like hours. I got tired of waiting, so I went to look for him. I searched almost everywhere I could, but I couldn't find him until I heard a noise coming from his bedroom. It sounded like a loud thud. I went to investigate, and when I got there, I found his bedroom door ajar, and when I looked inside, I saw that his bed was completely moved to the other side of the room, and what appeared to be underneath his bed was a black trap door. I walked closer to the door. It had an old rustic lock on it, and as I was about to open it, I heard something coming towards it. That's when I saw the door open, only to reveal Isaac with his head popped out of the trap door. He looked disheveled and shocked as he laid his eyes on me. Then he began to speak. "What are you doing here? I thought I told you to wait in the living room." I told him I had gotten worried because I heard a loud thud. Isaac looked as pale as a ghost. Gone was his kind patience and cool demeanor. In its place was a look of paranoia, fear, and anger. "Go back to the living room and wait at the piano now!" Not wanting to anger him further, I obeyed. When he got back to continue the lesson, he was back to his kind and patient attitude. It was like Isaac was a completely different person from the man in that room. When I tried to talk to him about what had happened in there and what he was doing, he just went silent and ignored me. That's when Isaac began to change. He started to be more strict with me, and at first it was subtle. He would watch my hands occasionally, and if I played a wrong note, he would scold me and said to play it again, but then it had gotten to the point where he was always watching my hands, and if I made the slightest mistake, he would grab my hands and physically make me play the right note. He would grab me so hard it started to hurt. He would start to tell me how my hands were so perfect, yet I wasted them so carelessly. I was starting to get scared of Isaac and the way he constantly looked at my hands. He looked as if he wanted them for himself. I tried telling my parents about it, but they didn't believe me. Every time they picked me up, Isaac would always turn on his relaxed demeanor and wear a fake smile across his face so they wouldn't get suspicious. When I mentioned how he would look at and grab my hands. They chalked it up to me trying to get out of my lesson, so I was trapped. I couldn't do anything. My parents wouldn't believe me, so all I could do was just bear through his lessons, but one day everything changed. I would get to know what Isaac was hiding and what a monster he truly was. I remember the day vividly. It was a warm spring day. School was starting to close up for the summer, and I was at Isaac's apartment. I was practicing some scales, but suddenly, without warning, Isaac got up from the seat and said, "Come with me. I want to show you something." I was confused but curious, so I followed him. He guided me to his bedroom, and there I saw the bed move to the other side of the room, revealing that same old metal black trap door, but this time it was wide open. Isaac then placed his hand on my shoulder. "This is my special prize room. I made it specifically for my best students. The reason why I was so upset was because you weren't ready yet. You needed more practice until you were ready, but now you are finally ready." Isaac leaned down to my level and pointed to the door. "I want you to go down there and pick out a prize." Most kids would have been excited about this, and I normally would have been, but not this time. Even I knew something was suspicious. For starters, the way he talked seemed like there was absolutely no emotion or soul behind his words. He seemed completely and utterly desensitized, but the main thing that kept me from going down there was the smell unlike before. His house mostly reeked of chemicals. The trap door seemed to let off a different smell that I could only describe as something rotting, but Isaac began to notice my fear as he began to tighten his grip on my shoulder. "Get in there, now." The moment he said those words, that was the final straw. I kicked Isaac's knee, causing him to let go of me as he clutched his leg. I tried to run out of the house, but I only managed to get to the living room before he grabbed me. He tried to wrestle me to the ground, but using all the strength I had left, I somehow managed to push him off of me, and as he fell, his head slammed into the piano keys, causing a loud thud mixed with the sounds of the piano. I ran out the door to one of his neighbors, who luckily had heard the commotion. I told them everything about the trap door and how Isaac had tried to force me inside. The neighbor ended up calling the cops. They arrested Isaac and searched his place and found the trap door. What I'm about to share is what they found in that room, but I'm warning you now, if you are squeamish or faint of heart when it comes to gore, stop reading now. You have been warned. When the police went down the trap door, they found the bodies of 6 other dead children exactly my age. Their faces were mutilated to the point beyond recognition. Their bodies were hung up on meat hooks. And the floor was completely soaked in blood, and some of it fresh, some of it old, black, and crusty. There was a metal table in the middle of the room, and on it was a bloody butcher's knife and a bone saw. And all of the dead children were missing their hands, and off of the right side of the room was a shelf containing the children's hands. Inside inside jars made of formaldehyde. Later on in the search, the police would also uncover the skeletons of 2 other children inside the floorboards beneath the piano. In between the 2 skeletons was an old dirty hammer with remnants of old and long dried blood on it. Isaac would be put on trial and sentenced to life in prison, but would later be killed by a prisoner only 2 years into his life sentence. When my parents first heard the news, they were terrified. They tried to help me get through it, and I've been going to therapy lately, but I don't think it's working. Even now that Isaac is dead, he still haunts me. I always think back to that evening, wondering what could have happened to me had I not been able to get away. I have constant nightmares about him catching up to me and making me one of his victims, and honestly, I don't think I'll ever be able to recover from this. No matter how hard I try.